It's 6:30. We're gonna call this meeting of the Joshua City Council to order. We do have a quorum present. At this time, we're going to do our pledge of allegiances. Mike, you mind leading us on these? Sure. All right. And if everybody would please remain standing afterwards for our invocation.
Please rise. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one.
Our invocation is going to be by Miss Angela Bashir.
Thank you. Please bow your heads. Father God, we ask your blessing on the people who have been taught to lead this community in which we live, work, and play. Help them as leaders to not ask first, how do we fix this, but to ask, what do we need to learn? How might we need to change, and to whom we need to listen? Father, grant them wisdom and courage to know and do what's right, true, and good. I pray that we are reminded that you're the unseen guest at this meeting. Guide each member by the spirit of community, the spirit of justice, and the spirit of love. May each of us glorify you, Father. We pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Thank you, Angela.
Be careful, Andy.
All right, we'll move to our work session this time. Item number 1, review and discuss questions related to the budget report and financial statement for October 2023. Mr. Peacock.
Well, we're 1 month in. Investments 19.75% returns. Thank you, Marcy. Most of the expenses that you're seeing out of line are front end loaded contractual expenses, TML, some county radio fees, fund view subscriptions, a lot of the initial things that are front end loaded that are annually. Happy to take any questions that you have, but Ms. Lawrence.
Looks good.
Paul? Donna?
No, sir.
Doug? Mr. Peacock, thank you very much. We're gonna skip item 2 at this time because those items are gonna come up later in the meeting. So we'll move on to the updates from the mayor and council members and updates from city staff members. It's been a good month. Things have been going pretty good. I hope y'all made it up to our fall festival on Main Street. Had a nice little time out there. The band that they had was playing music that a lot of people seem to like pretty well. Disco sucks. I don't like disco music. So they were an 80s band and they were doing very well with what they were playing. I will give them that. So
I don't know what they were singing, but it was singing good.
yeah,
I wasn't able to make it, but my wife and my neighbors went and they had a very good time.
Yeah.
The kids had a great time too.
So I did attend the annual Young Life banquet. Young Life does a great job here in the community for our young people. They are Johnson County Young Life. They go all over the place. It's a great organization. Attended the Navy Ball. If you've never had the honor of attending the Navy Ball on the Navy's birthday, it's a neat thing to do. Had a luncheon down in Cleburne with the other mayors of Johnson County, hosted by our wonderful county judge. It was a interesting time learning about economic development and our normal monthly library board or bi-monthly library board meeting, and actually went to the senior citizens Thanksgiving luncheon today. Saw Mr. Merle there holding down the fort for us. And he made sure Mike got his lunch provided too. So if anybody doesn't know it, Mike does not like green beans. So found that out today. And I did attend the monthly ministerial prayer planning meeting. They've got several things that they're looking for next year to get on the calendar, and hopefully the city will be able to get involved and work with them on that. Mike, you got anything?
No, I'm sorry I missed the Main Street event. was in another city enjoying their festival. My wife and I had a wine festival down in Kingsland, Texas.
Ah,
Enjoyed myself quite nicely.
Merle? No? All right. Mr. Dakota? Shelley? All right. Any staff have anything they wish to report? Okay,
I got a birthday.
yeah, Mike had a birthday, big
Mm.
one. No monkeys though. Didn't have any monkeys this time. So, we are having, Christmas on Main Street, December 2nd. It starts what, at 2 in the afternoon?
The parade starts at
The parade's at 2. We are doing a parade again, so, that's gonna be pretty fun, so start talking that up when you get a chance. Okay, we're now at the public forum. Anybody sign up to speak?
No, sir.
Anybody have anything they want to say? Okay. All right. Mr. Bailey, doing well. Mr. Rick Bailey, Commissioner Precinct number 1. Glad to have you in our meeting this evening, sir. We also have the mayor of Cleburne with us, Mr. Scott Kane, and what's his face? Mayor Burles and Chris Fletcher. So, glad to have you all with us this evening. So, and I'll introduce Mr. Craig Hunley as well. Craig is a person who is fighting very hard for our property tax rates. So glad to have them all here this evening. So, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Item number 1 is to discuss, consider possible action concerning the meeting minutes from October 19th. Anybody have anything they want to say about those? Okay. Hearing none, I'll accept the motion.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes from October.
Second motion. Okay, have a motion by Mike, seconded by Dakota to accept the minutes as presented. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, moving on to our regular agenda items. Item number 1 is a public hearing. We're opening at 6:38 on a request for a zoning change regarding approximately 5.51 acres of land in the Myers subdivision, lot 2, block 1, county of Johnson, Texas, located at 1140 West 9 FM 917 to change from R1 single family residential to the A agricultural district. Mr. Maldonado is not here this evening. In case you hadn't heard, he had a fire at his residence, and he's taking care of that business tonight. So, Mr. Peacock, you have anything you want to say about that?
No, it meets all the requirements that P and Z heard the request. The property is currently single family residential. It was zoned out on May the 16th in 2019 from ag, and the property owner simply asked him to have it converted back to ag. Planning and zoning board did approve that did make that recommendation to approve on November the 6th.
Is anybody here representing the owner? Okay. So at 6:39, we'll close the public hearing. We'll move on to item number 2, discuss, consider, and possible action on an ordinance changing the zoning of approximately 5.51 acres of land in the Myers subdivision, lot 2, block 1, county of Johnson, Texas, located at 1140 West FM 917 to change from R1 single family to A agricultural district. Anybody have anything they want to say? Any questions? Okay,
It's nice to see it change from R1 to ag. You see a lot of them going the other direction.
well,
And they have enough acreage to accommodate, so.
so do I have a motion?
Make a motion, we approve the change of ordinance or change of zoning as noted.
I'll second that.
Okay. So I have a motion by Shelley, seconded by Merle, to change the zoning of the said property. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Item number 3, discuss, consider possible action on an ordinance repealing existing section 5.07 food trucks of Article 5 permitted uses of the zoning ordinance found in Chapter 14 zoning of the Code of Ordinances and adopting new food truck regulations by adding Article 1.10 food trucks to Chapter 1 general provisions of the Code of Ordinances, providing for the regulation of food trucks. Mr. Peacock.
Yes, I'll be happy to talk about it. We had the discussion a month or two ago on the proposed food truck ordinance. One of the things we wanted to do was take it out of the zoning ordinance because that was a cumbersome process for someone as an applicant. And based on the discussion we had several meetings ago, we've taken the food truck provisions out of the zoning ordinance, put them into the regular code, Chapter 1 of the code. So it's an easier process for someone to follow and not have to go to P and Z and council if there's some sort of change or something they want. So what we've done is, I think we have a fairly streamlined ordinance, and it just simply goes through the process, the permitting process, requirements for food trucks on property, and some of the other issues we discussed. So it can't be long on a piece of property longer than 72 hours. If one day the city starts or creates a food truck area, we would do that through a zoning ordinance, but these are more the temporary food trucks coming in for a festival or for a short-term permit. And if there are any provisions that y'all want to change, or let me know, we can make that change if you wish, but be happy to answer any questions you may have.
So I went back and looked at the minutes from September because whenever I was looking at this, what I'm seeing here is different than what I remembered us discussing. And the discussion that we had in September, and with some of the different pieces that I know that I personally was concerned about. But in the minutes in September, several of us agreed that we were on board with changing it so it didn't require a conditional use permit. That's the piece that's going to make it easier for staff, right? I think we were all in agreement about that change. But I don't see that we discussed anything else that we were recommending changing. And in fact, what I'm really concerned about is in the packet that it talks about, making that change, and then that there are a few notable additions in the ordinance that are adding. But what I don't see called out in the packet was specifically the ask to remove one of the areas that I was most concerned about, with food trucks being located on an individual private parcel. So my ask, if we're going to do anything other than simply remove the point about a conditional use permit that we were all expecting, if we're going to look at changing this in more detail, I would like a red line version of what we're actually changing. But I'd also like to understand where the feedback for what was noted in the packet was delivered, because it's specifically calling out some additional notable additions to the ordinance, but it's not calling out notable exclusions. So I had to go through and dig through this whole ordinance to figure out what was being removed and what was being added, because it was different than what we specifically asked for in the September minutes. In the September minutes, we were all in agreement about the conditional use permit. And that's the only thing I was expecting to see here today. So
Okay,
how did we get from
guess-
there to here?
Maybe we have a different recollection of the September. I took my notes from the council meeting, not from the minutes of the meeting. And I know that some of the issues, I thought we captured in this, what the council had suggested. If there's something we need to change, I thought we had more that we discussed in September than just taking out the zoning ordinance and putting it into the code of ordinances.
Well, we talked about it in July and there were a lot of
Okay.
concerns, and we asked for more detail because I know that there were some questions about what the state ordinance already covered. Because some of our concerns were already going to be covered in the state ordinance. Well, we didn't have access to the state ordinance, so we brought it back and there was some additional information to clarify, what does the state ordinance already cover that we were worried about that we didn't need to, and we kept going. We keep hearing that we need to make these changes, but we're not hearing from any individual that's coming to us and telling us, why is the policy that's currently in place not working? Other than, if we change it to not be a conditional use permit, it will make staff easier, which I'm 100% on board, and staff is telling us that process would make it on board. So yes, let's consider that. But any of these other items, I'm not hearing any food truck vendor come to us and tell us that it's making it difficult for them and why we should make a whole lot of other changes.
Well, again, I'm not sure we're actually making a whole lot of other changes. The prior version of the food truck ordinance incorporated the state regulations, and it still does. In section 1.10.002, all those state requirements, so the kind of the health and safety aspects, we're not changing any of those. That's incorporated. That was in the old ordinance, and because when I drafted this ordinance, I used the old ordinance as a template. And my understanding was, so those provisions are still here in the ordinance. The other is, because we're taking this out of zoning, it had what I consider at least an easier permit process. Because in the past, if you wanted to, you had to come and file a zoning application, that was your permit. I mean, that's how you started the process. Since we took this out of zoning, I have, I promulgated, I added a provision that, well, we'd have to have some application fee since we're no longer getting an application when someone zones proper, it gets a CUP. So yes, I try to have what I consider a streamlined, what I heard from the council, and again, if I'm my misunderstanding incorrect, please let me know, was to make this relatively easy for someone to come in and get a permit for an event. Okay, this is almost like a special event permit versus some sort of zoning permit. And again, some of the issues on the permit form I think are pretty simple. The permit fee, I think I had a $25 permit fee for that. I recall the discussion about restroom requirements, and that I put that in here. I recall the discussion of the food truck has to be on appropriately zoned property. You couldn't put a food truck in someone's front yard, for example. And if they were going to do it on someone else's property, that we'd have to have some sort of written permission from the owner of the property, allowing them to do that so that someone wouldn't get a permit for someone's property without their knowledge. We had they couldn't be located shall be located within 500 feet of an entrance of a primary building that holds a certificate of occupancy. We didn't want anything to obscure the site visibility. As I recall, they would do a food truck blocking something. So anyway, so we had, I thought this proposal encapsulated what I heard. It could have been the July meeting, the September. I know we discussed it a couple times. I remember too, we had issues about we didn't want them to be on the property for more than 72 hours. So, and again, I'm sorry if that's not what you expected. I thought this encapsulated what we discussed at the end of the meeting. That's from my notes that I took away from, and there were a few things like the permit. I know we wanted not to have a burdensome permit. I put in $25. That was just based on what I recalled from the meeting at the time. So if there's anything we need to change, I'm certainly happy to make whatever changes. If there's something in the old ordinance that you think is appropriate that needs to be included.
I think it's easier to say that what I was expecting was only the conditional use permit being removed and everything else was remaining the same. That was my understanding.
Which basically it does, we just have these additions, correct?
Correct. I mean, I think
We didn't take anything out of the
You
old.
did. food truck shall be located on an individual private parcel where an existing permanent business operates. That was discussed multiple times.
Yeah.
That has been removed.
Well,
Uh,
let me say, I would say though, we have a variation of that. And let me see where it is. I just read it. Well, we have I do remember the discussion on section 1.10.005A4. Food trucks shall be located within 500 feet of an entrance of a primary building that holds a certificate of occupancy.
That was already
And, correct. And what part are you saying that, I mean,
two.
I do remember, for example, in item 7, food trucks are not operated in driveways or fire lanes.
On the current ordinance.
2 is food trucks, vendors shall provide the city with a copy of written permission from the property owner.
what section shall?
5.7 food trucks, a location.
Oh, you're reading from the old ordinance?
Yes,
Okay,
that's what I'm talking about, what was removed. The packet calls out, here are some things that we added. The packet didn't call out, there's something that we removed, something specifically that I had a problem with. So I had to dig through it line by line to see what was actually removed,
okay.
because we didn't get a red line version, because I was expecting it to be simply that we're changing it from removing the conditional use permit process. That's all I was expecting. And I went back and looked in the minutes and confirmed that that's what Angela and I had specifically, there were some other questions in there, but that's what we had agreed, that we were okay with that. But the verbiage in the packet, and I don't know who makes the decision on what that verbiage is, calls out, you know, here's some other things that we added. It did not call out, here are some things that we removed. Which I understand, it's my responsibility to go in and read this and understand what we're asking for changes on. But if we're going to specifically call out things that are added, rather than go in and read it line by line yourself and figure it out, I want everything that's added and everything that's removed put in the packet.
Well, let me add, I was not aware of that, and that often when we do that, for example, when we adopt changes to our zoning ordinance or to our subdivision ordinance, happy to do that. You unfortunately will get a packet that the red line is almost unintelligible, but if you all want to do that, I'm happy to do that. For
If we're not
example,
going
this
to-
is
if we're not going to highlight everything that's changed. I mean, I would be happy to have an abbreviated version, but the abbreviated version did not cover the changes.
I don't prepare the cover sheet for the
Yeah,
item.
I'm seeing information came from, where the direction came from on, these are what the changes were, this is how the decision is made and what's presented to council in the abbreviated packet.
I'll be happy to tell you, I took this from my notes of the meeting and then sent the agenda to the staff to take a look at as well. And so I believe this was consistent with what we had discussed. I apologize if you don't think it is. And I gave it to staff to also review. So this is, I just, okay.
Yes, quick question. So you're more concerned about who prepared the action item for the agenda that did not include the total differences?
Understand. I can make sure that I am fully aware of what we are voting on without having to read an ordinance line by line.
Okay.
Because I read it and I was expecting this to be on the agenda, and I was expecting the removal of the conditional use permit to be on the agenda. That's what I was expecting. And then whenever I read it in more detail and I see that we're calling out, there were some notable additions. And I did not recall that we talked about any other additions other than the conditional use permit. And so I went back and I looked in the minutes and confirmed that we had not talked about that. Or we had agreed on the permit, but that was it. And so when I started looking into it, I went back and looked at the specific items that I was particularly concerned about to see if they were changed. And they were, but not called out in the abbreviated understanding of here's what was changed. So I then have to go in and start looking at it line by line, making my own red line version of this to see what else may have been changed that I was not aware of. So we can either do one of two things. We can go to changes don't come unless we have a red line version of everything, or we can make sure that the abbreviated analysis has everything that was changed.
Okay, well, let me say one thing, the permit application process, again, since we use a zoning process, if I had given you, I've just put this into the general code, we would have had no process for a permit. Because our zoning provisions don't require you get a 72-hour permit. So the permit provisions I took were from our special events ordinance, where we have a permit process outlined there with some modifications.
So that's the removal of the conditional use permit. That's
Correct.
the
That was something that
process
was
to get it removed.
necessitated by the removal, taking it out of the zoning ordinance into the code of ordinances. So that was one thing. So that is generally new, but that also is consistent with our other permit processes for things like special events. The food truck requirements, I think, are generally the same, other than the notations I had for some of the requests from council about private property, the accessibility of restrooms, et cetera. Some of those were not in our old ordinance, as I recall. And again, those are from my notes from what we had discussed about at the meeting. The other issues, declaring an offense penalty, all those are pretty standard provisions. So yes, I mean, the whole permitting process is different because we're going for a whole different way to look at it. So just taking it from the zoning ordinance and plopping into the code of ordinances without having a permit process doesn't, I mean, we don't have a permit process, then we have a food truck ordinance with no application process and what the city considers when it grants or doesn't grant a permit. So again, that's why I use as an analog the special events permit, because we have provisions in our special events ordinance about how you get a permit and you go through the process. So again, I think it's generally consistent with what we wanted, but I had to add some flesh and some meat and bones to what the permit process was, because that wasn't included. And I added a provision that you have to have a valid license, because we have to be able to enforce it if someone doesn't have a license, or a few things of that nature. Again, in a zoning ordinance, we don't have if you don't have a permit, you get a citation, and the zoning, we don't file a zoning case against someone who doesn't have the specific zoning authorization. That's a $2,000 fine. Since this is by statute is a $500 fine. I did add a provision: if you don't have a permit, that you violate the ordinance, and you're subject to prosecution for that. So that is a difference, because this is not a zoning ordinance now. It's a general permit process. If you like, in the future, I'll be happy to do a staff report and not have staff do it. And for example, I know I've done a few of those on the subdivision regs because of the new legislation, some zoning regs for the new regulations. I'll be happy to do those if you like that.
I think on some of those things, and a lot of them that we see, you're talking about a transition of a paragraph. You're talking about some verbiage between, a handful of paragraphs, and it's kind of easier to go in and understand what the change is. Whenever you have changes in a policy, because changes in the state legislature and stuff like that, you've been really good about bringing that to us so that it's clear for us to understand what we're being asked to consider for a change. This was not clear for us to understand all the different changes, especially whenever there were some specific things that we had some concerns about before. And I understand that we're going from a different flavor of what we're talking about as far as the ordinance versus a policy, because we're taking up a conditional use permit. But it made it very difficult for me to go through and find that what I was specifically wanting to not have removed had been in fact removed.
What exactly is that got removed specifically?
That they have to be on a private parcel where an existing permanent business operates. That's the specific verbiage that has been removed. that I was hoping to not have.
Written. Kind of says something similar to that by saying that it requires a written permission of the property owner.
But it doesn't
Um,
require that an existing business is there, which is what the very original issue was that was brought up. Because there was,
Some places that aren't gonna have an existing business, but they had. The business may have been there in the past, and the facilities, the requirements for facilities, restrooms. Sinks, washing to, hot and cold water, things like that that's in the provision. It's just. Not required to put it on a permanent.
no, it's saying that they have to have something located within 500 feet, so they can set up on a lot as long as there's a business close by that allows them to use their facilities.
Right.
And I think that that was one of the things that we were trying to not. I say I mean, I fully recognize I am one vote on this board, and I am very happy to go along with whatever the majority. I'm just frustrated because we had talked about some of these specifically. But yet we've still not heard from any individual food truck owner that has specific examples that they can tell us why these particular clauses are problematic. And so,
I don't think our reason behind creating this standalone ordinance was to address anyone's specific request. It was a preemptive attempt to make it
I think it's
possible for the future.
random that we brought up the food truck stuff out of nowhere when we're building. a
It
food truck.
actually started by
It
a
started by
property
that.
owner who wanted to put a food truck on a
Right,
undeveloped piece of property.
correct.
And that's where the state won't allow us to by state code. And we got to looking at our ordinance, and was cumbersome going through the zoning process, so on and so forth. That's where the changes started being made. So what I would like to suggest is that on item 4 or 4 under section 1.10.005, where it says no food trucks operating under article, food trucks shall be located within 500 feet. I kind of agree with you. That's a pretty big distance. Maybe change that distance down a little bit, and instead of saying of a primary building, change that to say of a business that has an occupancy permit.
Why don't we just leave line 2 in there as it is?
From the old ordinance?
Mhm.
Does it contradict anything in this ordinance?
If you tell me about the old ordinance, it's basically what it says.
Food truck shall be located on an individual private parcel where an existing permanent business operates in a building with a certificate of occupancy.
Again, I thought was someone had raised the issue that sometimes on a building in the parking lots that again, I thought this issue was raised that is sometimes too small of an area that we needed to give them a little flexibility in case they were nearby. If I remember, if you have a restaurant and they have a parking lot and a restaurant there, it may not, I recall some discussion of,
Then that's not a good place to put a food truck.
well, I mean, if we want to deny that, that's fine. I have no problem with that. If you want to change that, but I remember I believe I remember the discussion. It's been 4 or 5 months ago. That restriction sometimes impeded someone who wanted to do a food truck a little bit further away and that because of a small piece of property, that would be an impediment for them having it on that property they own. If y'all want to do it, again, if maybe my memory is incorrect, it could be.
I think a red line, I wasn't here in September, so I can't speak for what was spoken to or agreed upon. And, but I think a red line, detail from what's changed from the original to this one right here. would be appropriate for us to read and go back and research and see it. Cause I wasn't here for that discussion, so I don't know what was said. I'm sitting here listening and trying to determine, so. But to me, it'd be easier for everybody to agree that what's in this ordinance that changed from the other ordinance, or what's left out,
No, again, I'm happy to do that. It's just, as a practical matter, you often get an ordinance that is all redlined.
Well,
And virtually, because I'm not comparing an existing ordinance with amendments to the ordinance. I'm getting rid of an ordinance in its entirety and putting in a new ordinance. And so I'm happy to give you a red line. I think what you're gonna find is virtually all of this will be redlined. And I mean, to me, I'm not sure that's terribly helpful, but
That's what my point is let's just determine what it is that you want on here. And if it needs to be addition, we can discuss it and then we can just add it and go on with it. I like the way it is lined out right now. If it's missing something that Shelley's concerned about, let's discuss it, let's add it. We don't need a redacted copy, a red line copy, let's just figure out what it is that it's missing, and let's add it. Let's discuss it and add it.
So I mean, I wasn't here last month either, but so are we changing this for a special event or is this day in and day out? Like
This would be.
tomorrow I could go get a permit, set up a food truck for 3 days, take it down Monday, bring it back Tuesday.
this is
Correct.
taken from the old ordinance. So it's really
Mostly.
described, yeah.
Well, it's its own entity.
Hang on a second, the code is.
Currently, it's for special events only, correct?
No, might have to get a special zoning conditional use permit
Put a food truck
anywhere.
anywhere for
Yeah.
3 days. Is that
I
right?
don't think we had a time frame on the old.
Well, it wasn't, it was just a conditional use permit.
Go back. And that's, they have to be removed on a daily basis, may only operate in the business hours of the primary business and may not be parked longer than 12 hours. That's what's currently there. And then the new is the 72 hours.
Well, I mean, my opinion on it, like I said, we have this food truck thing coming down the pipeline, so, I mean, I know that's probably a couple years down the road, but I would say that we have a designated area for temporarily.
if there was some discussion in one of the meetings, I think about economic development, about doing a food truck park.
Yeah.
And that would be a zoning ordinance and that'd probably be a planned development because that would be an ongoing business enterprise and we would have standards for that when that came along. Years ago, there was a discussion across the street about the possibility of a food truck and it'd be a permanent. And that would be a significantly different zoning ordinance and different criteria, because that's always going to be there, or you'd have 3, 4, 5 food trucks there permanently. That requires something significantly different than what this is more the short term. Someone comes in, a festival, and especially event, and this addresses that. As a practical matter, from other cities that I work with, you don't have food trucks coming in for 3 days here, moving 3 days here, moving 3 days here. That doesn't usually happen.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought this all stemmed from like when this ordinance was created where we didn't have food trucks lining the main drag of town day in and day out. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
So, I mean, with this being said, I mean, I feel like, you could go get a permit for 72 hours, pick your trailer up, go get another permit and park it right back there for 72 hours.
Well, that would be where staff would say, hey, you just already been here 72 hours, you gotta wait for a week or 2 to come back. or
Okay.
something.
But
All
do
right.
we have- this-
It'd be a policy that would have to be developed. for
Okay.
that.
to be able to enforce, or is that
That
being
just a general
discretion what's needed for y'all to be able to make those decisions? Or does that have to be in the policy?
Yeah, I think we need to put, for anything to be enforceable, we'd have to to have it in the policy to
Because
give
right
code
now-
enforcement some
Because right now,
options.
it's being for- can't remain 72 hours. There's not anything saying that they can't just pick it up and come right back. So,
Mike, you have something else you wanted to add?
No, I just,
so to answer your question, Mike, what you were saying before, if I were to make a motion as far as to address what I was specifically concerned about, would be, as it's stated, with the exception of adding back in this specific line two that I could give to Terry, which is that they have to be located on an individual private parcel where an existing permanent business operates in a building with a certificate of occupancy, which is in our current policy. That specific item is the one that I have issue with.
So why don't we put that language in here? And then we'll address we take a look at what.
Yeah.
The
as far as
number of
parking,
permits, how many times we're gonna,
because that was.
sign
another-
ordinance allows signs for so long and only so many times. We can take a
Right,
look at
because that
that.
was something else that we had
Bring it
talked
back.
about, in 12 hours that's currently in place. Again, I don't recall that being the direction that we had decided to go on, because the current policies, they have to leave within 12 hours. So the 72-hour policy, as it's noted in here, is exactly what Dakota says. They just pick it up, put it back down, assuming that they have the permit. But if we aren't giving staff the language that allows them to enforce what we're looking for, then it's not helpful. We're putting them in a position.
When we had the zoning model, and, well, we still have the zoning model in place technically right now. Every
They
time
have to come in each time.
they have to come in each time and go, and then possibly go through council and P and Z. So there was really no way you could come in and just move it over from a Thursday to a Monday, because the process prohibited you from doing that. Well, if you want to, we could add a provision like Mike said, say like in a calendar year that no one shall receive more, no permit should be issued for a single.
you could
applicant. X number of times, how many, fill in the blank, how often you want that. I mean,
if you use number 9, food trucks shall not remain on any parcel more than 72 hours, and then just add within a given 7-day period or within a given, add the verbiage of it can't be more than 72 hours in a week.
Yeah.
And that would solve some of the issue of pond hopping.
I like that.
So a 7-day period would,
Makes
And
sense.
then that would be like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or a Thursday, Friday, Saturday type deal, and then they can't do it again Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. That would solve that question. And then maybe, I don't know, I don't disagree with what you're asking as far as the certificate of occupancy in the building, except for the reason of if I own a piece of property and it's maybe not a business anymore, but they wanna put their taco truck there 3 days on the weekend. It's not a currently occupied business or lot. It's a lot that I own. And if it's got a driveway, which is a provision, there's no drive-throughs or anything like that, all those things are followed. And it's got adequate parking, adequate water, all those things. If it covers those bases, then I think we still have a functioning
I don't think
ordinance.
it,
And if you have a piece of property, you could allow somebody to put something on it. As long as it's maybe put in there that it has to be already zoned a commercial property, not just
It's in there.
not just residential. So
It's in
it's,
there.
then we're kind of covered.
Yeah.
But having it have to be an occupied business does kind of pigeonhole it somewhat in my eyes. I mean,
But there is a provision here that says it has to have plumbed public restrooms on site as well.
within
So-
500 feet. So what I'm saying is
Okay.
if they wanted to, maybe get with
no, but you said,
O'Reilly's and put a food truck in an adjacent open lot.
But number 6 currently says that no food truck shall be located on a vacant lot. They took that out.
Right, to write it like this, and then that's what I'm saying. The old yellow house that's next door to Cote.
Yeah.
If somebody wanted to put something there for 3 days, it would allow for that. It's not an occupied business, but someone owns that property if they wanted to. That's what I'm saying,
But then,
and I would be okay with that.
but do they have to get written permission from, say, what did you say that restaurant is?
Like Gringa.
It's La Gringa.
Okay, so do
I still
they,
call it
if
Tacote,
they-
like I call Chino's.
yeah, if you were to put up a food truck in that yellow empty building, do they have to get permission from La Gringa to use their restrooms and use their public facilities?
Unless they're using the facilities that are maybe still in the house. You know, unless they have a maybe auto, let them use it, or
Do that?
they have, but they have to show proof of it.
So
that
let
they
me ask
have
you this.
facilities.
So what's currently proposed, food truck vendors shall provide the city with a copy of a written permission from the property owner to allow the operation of a food truck and to allow the food truck and their customers to access a commercially plumbed public restroom on site. So does that mean then that a food truck would have to be on a non-vacant lot that has a building with a certificate of occupancy? Because you can't,
It could be interpreted that way, and the way you read it.
I don't
Absolutely.
interpret it that way. I don't want to
Ask
create
Alice.
to interpret, because that's how we create problems.
I agree with you.
So,
Whereas this is extremely clear. And this is like, well, maybe that's what it means and so in that instance, I would think this would make it crystal clear so that if somebody comes to staff for a permit, they're not questioning, well, but this location, it does have whatever, and so it meets the criteria, whereas this is crystal clear.
I like the word commercially in there. You know, it's not a house, it's a commercial business.
Correct.
So Mayor, why don't we,
Table this.
let's table it, let's take it back. We'll get with Aaron, we'll get with Terry, we'll make another stab at it and we'll come back in December and.
Would you like my one highlighted thing?
And I'd be happy to take it, yeah. And then if you want to, we can kind of send out a.
Right.
Yeah, we'll get a draft put together to maybe to send out, make sure we catch everything that everybody's looking for.
Yeah, I would also suggest that.
And then the 72 hours within
Yes,
7 days out.
Okay. And so,
Between
2 hours in 7 days.
Yeah, it's a 7-day period.
And giving staff the ability to, I know staff's doing the permitting, but we want to make sure staff's protected if they say, no, you cannot do it. Is there any language in here that we can strengthen up a little bit to make staff safe from somebody's repercussions?
Yeah, we'll put the 7-day, what was talked about in there, we'll address some things. And
But is there,
Put a
there
policy
may be
together.
other reasons why the staff says, no, we don't want them there besides just the 7-day period.
Oh, yeah, I mean, any of these requirements, if someone doesn't meet them, they don't get a permit.
And Mike, look at it in a point of view, this is a little different angle, but look at it in a point of view if it's enforceable by code enforcement to maybe do spot checks. If they have maybe somebody calls in, or maybe somebody complains, or maybe they just want to stop in and check. Do they have things so that it's easy for them to understand what they're saying? Hey, well, you don't have, you said there was commercial restrooms there. I'm not really seeing commercial restrooms, and then have them something they can enforce.
Oh, yeah.
Like you were saying about being enforceable.
What?
Just make sure the verbiage and stuff is enforceable.
Yeah, closer to a commercial building.
I don't care, because if they're on a commercial,
With a CO.
yeah,
Doesn't matter if it's
I don't
500 or 300 feet.
as long as it's on that lot, I don't care.
Put it on the roof, right? I mean, put a ladder.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and, if everybody's in agreement, we'll go ahead and table this till next month.
Let's do this, whatever the specific date is, so we don't have to do any renoticing, because there is the zoning component in this that we removed, so we, December 14th.
December 14th.
14.
I'm sorry, it's not. It's December 21st.
There's a
Okay, so we're gonna table this till our December 21st meeting. And we will be getting a draft copy sometime in the next couple of weeks to look at before we
That's good.
get there. Everybody good with that?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Okay, so moving right along then. Item number 4, discuss, consider a possible action on a resolution affirming the casting of votes for the 2024-2025 election of the Board of Directors of the Johnson County Central Appraisal District. Last month, we nominated Paul Jones for the Central Appraisal District Board. Mr. Hunley, is here he's kind of been directing this movement to get some different people onto the board. Would you like to speak about this real quick?
Yes.
Okay, time's up.
Been at a radio show tonight and everything, I had to speak good about these two guys. So. Well, I'm never coming back.
So it works, man.
No. So.
Rodney Dangerfield.
For 4.5 years, I've been fighting hard to get just regular citizens on the CAD board of directors. I promise you, there's not a person in this room knows what goes on behind the closed doors of the Central Appraisal District. It's kept away from the citizens. And it's time that we open the curtains, be fair and balanced between the taxing entities and the citizens. We need to know what's going on. Every one of these board of directors should be elected by the public anyways. But right now, we're doing it, we pick citizens. These gentlemen have backed us up with their votes. To this day, we have 2 citizens elected on the CAD board. I don't think it's ever happened anywhere before. We have 2 more candidates left, Mr. Dwayne Goulding and Mr. Paul Jones. They're both needing votes. Mr. Goulding is about 400 and something votes short. Mr. Jones, he's gonna need a good 700 plus. But Mr. Goulding is leading the pack right now amongst other candidates. So, and it's your decision who you give your votes to. I don't know how, I think you have what, maybe
51?
51 votes. We appreciate it. Just you giving it to one of your citizens show that you support the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig.
Do we have a copy of the list of all the candidates?
It was in the.
We had a copy of all the,
We do. It may not be in a packet, but we do. I know we've
I saw
emailed
it.
it out.
It was emailed out.
Yeah, they're copy.
well, this council unanimously, nominated Paul Jones to represent us.
I think it was a unanimous vote that night,
Yeah, it was.
put him on there, so.
So, but there are other candidates, there's the consideration that, there are other people out there, so. Does anybody have any questions or any
I have
discussion?
questions. And it's just because I don't understand this process exactly, so it's really just looking for more clarification. So you said that there were 2 people, and those are both the 2 people that you're recommending?
No, we had 4 people that we were running the Central Appraisal District Board of Directors.
Okay.
4 people.
That's as citizens, and there was three board members up for reelection.
They were all up for reelection.
All of them?
No.
Okay.
Okay. There were 4 up for reelection.
There's 5 people on the board, and 4 of them are up for election.
Yes, I want to get the list of all the candidates, so we can.
The
Look at it.
board election is very confusing.
I'm trying to.
And I'll sum it up real quick. Every county has 5,000 votes.
Okay.
And depending on their tax levy, how much correct tax levy, how much money you bring in, is how many votes a certain entity gets. Burleson had, what, 377? And Mayor Kane, y'all had, what, 258?
The ISDs are the ones with the
Oh,
heavy
the
votes.
ISDs have the largest amount of votes. Joshua ISD the other night gave us all of their votes, which were, I believe, 379 votes. We still have Burleson ISD with 880 votes out. The largest amount of votes was Johnson County. Mr. Bailey and them had 963. The only place that as on the show tonight, the only person that had to back us up is the very place I grew up in, the school I went to, and that's Woodburn ISD, unfortunately.
So I know that we nominated Paul Jones and then
The other people running, Don Beeson, Senior, Vance Castles, Toby Ford,
Vance Castle's been, he's already been voted on.
okay?
Okay.
Toby Ford, Dwayne Goulding, Paul Jones, Amy Lingo, Janine,
Amy Lingo's been voted on.
Prazik, Brenda,
Somebody from Venus, we don't know.
yeah, Brenda Webb and John Wood. Brenda Webb, Don Beeson, Vance Castles are already on the CAD. What about Miss Prazik? Is she?
She's just running, and
Okay.
I don't know her, but she's a candidate from Venus, Texas.
I'm
So-
just curious as far as our votes, I mean, because I know that we nominated Paul, but is the value in is the weight of our votes, is the benefit to vote for Paul, or are they better used? Is there another,
Thing or?
for another
what I'm-
candidate?
You might, yeah, it's kind of what he said. We threw all of our votes towards,
Dwayne Gould.
Golding because it looked like that he had the best chance of being an.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. Where do our votes have the best chance of actually doing some good?
And some of the votes that are required to do these security. 834, and so he's the closest, and then Mr. Jones is a little bit behind that. And so it kind of depends on, and both of those were some of the outsiders that they had recommended. And so you had the county that broke rank, and then Burleson and Cleveland and a lot of other communities to try to show unity. And so I think, to your point, Goulding gives you the best chance of getting somebody closer to being over the top. But you could go him or Paul Jones, and those are both outsiders that are outside of that process. And I was disappointed in CISD too.
I know, it's upsetting. I went to school there.
And we don't have to do it all to one. We can split them up. We can do all kinds of stuff. So.
To go where it would actually do the most good.
Yeah.
I mean,
And you can split your votes.
right, but then are we diluting our vote?
So. Any more discussion?
Well, I understand. I was thinking the exact same thing. I believe that our consensus is that we need to back the candidate that we have the best chance of pushing over the edge. If that's what it's required, is every vote counts.
Even if it's not our person.
It is, right. So nothing worse in life is to have a house divided where one votes a Democrat and one votes Republican, because you just canceled each other out. So you're not helping
Yeah.
society any. I believe in let's help each other and back our votes to the candidates that's closest to the finish line, maybe to help push it over.
And I don't think Mr. Jones would disagree.
I really don't think he would either. He's a logical person.
Yeah.
And I make a motion that we go that route, that we use our votes towards Mr. Gordon.
Okay. I have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, a motion by Mike, seconded by Shelley to cast all 51 votes for the Johnson County Central Appraisal District. We've got other words I'd like to use for that. For Mr. Dwayne Goulding. In discussion, one thing I will say, based on the constitutional amendment election that we had back in November, it is my understanding that there will be a general election for 3 positions on the CAD next November. By the people. You know, that if we don't support Paul tonight, we can support him then. So, you know, it's not, we're not standing for Paul. I think it's a good idea to go. I think it's a good idea to go the route to get the most bang for our buck.
Great.
Any other discussion? Sir. Okay. All those in favor of giving 51 votes to Dwayne Goulding? It's unanimous. Yes, sir.
There's no reflection on Paul. It's just a
No.
matter of neglecting our votes till we get what we want.
Yeah.
Next year, the judge is not gonna be appointing the appeals people. It'll be the board.
That would be good.
Very important.
That's a good point.
That's real good. Okay. So, we're giving all 51 votes then to Mr. Goulding. Okay. Item number 5, discuss consider possible action on a resolution authorizing the Type B Economic Development Corporation expenditures for equipment for the Parks Department. Mr. Peacock, or do you want one of our Type B members to speak about that? Me. Well, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, I don't mind talking about it. I mean, we discussed, well, we actually bought.
Thank you all. for
Gentlemen,
coming.
thank you.
Appreciate your
Yeah.
hard work, guys.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, I think.
Let's be careful. Good, good, good.
Yes, sir.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Yes, sir. Yeah. I talked to Rocky yesterday.
Oh, did you?
Any related to him?
They're all related.
Thank y'all.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay.
But anyway, we talked about purchasing a dump trailer. And I think a ride behind blower system. Either, I had a picture of a pool behind.
Those were some of the options that we had,
Okay.
but they opted to go with the self-propelled, just it gives them a lot more flexibility.
Okay. Well, we purchased both in here. I think one of them was 10,000, the blower, and 15,000 for the trailer.
Just the opposite.
Just opposite, yeah. But we purchased that, and then we talked about a pickleball court somewhere.
That's for future. agendas.
Yeah, future, but I mean, it's still on the minutes of the meeting, so. But other than that, we talked about the budget, you know, what we was doing, how much we was ahead. Yeah, yes, some more hand tools. I don't know exactly what he was buying.
It's broken down with minor hand tools, some repair and maintenance items in their current offices and shop. The dump trailer, a blower, a power washer trailer. And then the total cost is offset. There was $29,500 budgeted for 0-turn mowers that didn't get removed out of the capital CIP program. We bought those last year. So they voted to reallocate that $29,500 towards this. So the difference of this, what we'll be amending their budget for these items is $28,379. When they unanimously approved that and I'm sorry, Steve is not here to, our new parks manager is, if you haven't noticed the park lately, drive out there. Cause you can already see a difference in the way things are being done.
Any questions, Mike? Mark? Coda? Sir. Shelley?
Nope.
Okay, I'll accept the motion.
Make a motion, we approve the resolution authorizing Type B Economic Development Corporation expenditures for equipment on the park department.
Okay. I've got a motion by Shelley, seconded by Merle to accept the authorization of type B Economic Development Corporation expenditures for equipment for the Parks Department. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, anybody have any questions on any staff reports? Any staff want to talk about their reports? Okay. No? All right. So at 7:36, we are going to recess into executive session. City Council Joshua will recess in executive session. Close meeting pursuant to provisions, chapter 551, subchapter D, Texas Government Code, to discuss the following. Pursuant to the code, consult with the city attorney, relating to pending litigations, to wit, Ling Zing versus City of Joshua et al. Civil action. And item number 2, in accordance with Texas Governance Code 551.074, to deliberate regarding appointment, employment, and evaluation of public officers, employees, to wit, our city manager and our city secretary. We are recessed.
So before we go back in there, we have a student who's observing for a report that they happen to have any, because you're probably going to leave. Did you have any questions or anything for your report? Okay. Well, thank you for coming.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.